My name is Julia, and I never imagined my life would turn out like this. I grew up in a pretty normal family, well, normal for us anyway. My dad was always busy with his window frame business, and my mom took care of the house. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. Dad rarely talked about work at home. He'd come in late, give Mom a quick kiss, and ask me how school was. That was about it. I didn't mind though. I was happy in my own little world. I remember the day everything changed. I was 22, fresh out of college and trying to figure out what to do with my life. I overheard Dad on the phone, his voice tense. "No, absolutely not. I won't let you take over my company. I've worked too hard for this," he said. I shouldn't have eavesdropped, but I couldn't help it. My stomach twisted as I listened. Dad's company was in trouble? Why hadn't he said anything? That night at dinner, I watched him closely. He seemed normal, joking with Mom about her overcooked pot roast. But I saw the worry lines around his eyes, the way his smile didn't quite reach them. I had to do something. But what? I didn't know the first thing about business. Still, I couldn't just sit back and watch my family's livelihood get destroyed. The next day, I did some digging. It wasn't hard to find out who was trying to take over Dad's company. Big shot businessman named Robert Caldwell. His office wasn't far from our house. The receptionist looked at me like I was crazy when I asked to see Mr. Caldwell. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked, eyebrow raised. "No, but it's important. Please, just 5 minutes," I begged. She must have taken pity on me, because after a phone call, she waved me towards the elevator. "Top floor," she said. The ride up felt like it took forever. When the doors opened, I was face to face with Robert Caldwell himself. He was older than I expected, silver-haired and sharp-eyed. Well, he said, looking me up and down. "What do we have here?" I swallowed hard. "Mr. Caldwell, I'm Julia Thompson. I'm here about my father's company, Thompson Windows." His eyebrows shot up. "Thompson's daughter? This is unexpected. Come in, let's talk." I followed him into his office, trying not to gape at the view. He settled behind his massive desk and gestured for me to sit. "So, Miss Thompson, what can I do for you?" I took a deep breath. "Please don't take over my father's company. It means everything to him. There must be another way." Caldwell leaned back, studying me. "Interesting. I have a proposition for you, Miss Thompson. I'll leave your father's company alone, if you agree to marry my son." I stared at him, sure I'd misheard. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. Marry my son, make him grow up a little. Do that, and your father's company is safe." I left Caldwell's office in a daze. Marry his son? Was he insane? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I didn't have much choice. It was either this, or watch my father's life's work crumble. The next day, I found myself back in that intimidating office. Caldwell was waiting, a smug smile on his face. "So, Miss Thompson, have you made your decision?" I took a deep breath. "Yes. I'll do it. I'll marry your son." Caldwell clapped his hands together. "Excellent. Let's introduce you two, shall we?" Before I knew it, I was being ushered into another room. And there he was, Caldwell's son. I'd expected some stuffy businessman type, but the man who stood up to greet me was anything but. He was tall, with messy dark hair and a crooked smile. "Hey," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Jack. You must be Julia?" I shook his hand, trying not to show my surprise. "Yeah, that's me." Jack's father cleared his throat. "I'll leave you two to get acquainted." As soon as the door closed behind him, Jack's casual demeanor vanished. He ran a hand through his hair, looking uncomfortable. "Look, I'm sorry about this. My dad, he's got some pretty old-fashioned ideas." I shrugged, trying to seem nonchalant. "It's fine. We're both adults, right? We can handle this." Jack laughed, but it sounded forced. Yeah, sure. Just a casual arranged marriage. No big deal. We spent the next hour talking, and I hate to admit it, but Jack was kind of interesting. He was smart and funny, even if he did seem a bit irresponsible. I could see why his father wanted him to grow up. Over the next few weeks, Jack and I started dating, if you could call it that. We went out to dinners, movies, the usual stuff. But there was always this undercurrent of awkwardness. We both knew this wasn't real, no matter how much we pretended. And so, 6 months after that fateful meeting in Caldwell's office, I found myself walking down the aisle. My dad looked so proud, so happy. He had no idea of the deal I'd made to save his company. As I said my vows, I looked into Jack's eyes. There was no love there, not really. But there was friendship, and maybe that could be enough. The reception was a blur of congratulations and champagne. Jack's mother, Elizabeth, cornered me at one point, her smile tight. "Welcome to the family, dear," she said, her voice dripping with insincerity. "I do hope you'll make Jack happy." I plastered on my best fake smile. "I'll certainly try, Mrs. Caldwell." As we left for our honeymoon, I caught a glimpse of my father-in-law. He was beaming, clearly pleased with himself. I felt a flash of anger. This was all just a game to him. The first few years of our marriage were interesting, to say the least. Jack and I settled into a routine of sorts. We lived in a nice house, courtesy of his father's wealth, but it felt more like we were roommates than husband and wife. I tried my best to be a good influence on Jack. Slowly but surely, I saw changes in him. He started spending less time with his party-loving friends and more time at the office with his father. I could see the pride in his father's eyes when Jack started showing real interest in the business. It made me feel like maybe this whole arrangement wasn't for nothing. Jack's mother, on the other hand, was a different story. She never outright said anything, but I could feel her disapproval radiating off her in waves. The way she'd purse her lips when I spoke, or the backhanded compliments she'd give. "Oh, Julia, that dress is interesting. So brave of you to wear something like that." I'd grit my teeth and smile. "Thank you, Mrs. Caldwell." Despite the challenges, I held on to hope. Maybe, just maybe, Jack and I could grow to love each other. Maybe when we had kids, things would change. But life had other plans. It was a crisp fall day when we got the news. Jack and I sat in the doctor's office, the silence heavy between us. "I'm sorry," the doctor said, his voice gentle. "But the tests show that you, Mr. Caldwell, are unable to father children." The words hit me like a physical blow. No children. The one thing I'd been counting on to bring us closer, to make this marriage real, was now impossible. That night, as I lay awake, I thought about my own parents. Dad's business had flourished since my marriage to Jack. He'd even managed to double his turnover. I was happy for him, truly. But I couldn't help feeling a bit lost. I wanted to work, to have a purpose beyond being Jack's wife. But when I brought it up to him, his response was swift and firm. "Work? Why would you need to work? We have more than enough money." "It's not about the money, Jack. I want to do something meaningful." He shook his head. "In our circle, wives don't work. They do charity. Why don't you start a foundation or something?" And so, the Julia Caldwell Foundation for Children with Cancer was born. It wasn't what I'd imagined for myself, but it gave me purpose. I threw myself into the work, organizing fundraisers, visiting hospitals, doing whatever I could to help. Jack didn't seem to care much about my new passion. In fact, he didn't seem to care much about anything I did these days. We were living parallel lives, inhabiting the same space, but rarely intersecting. Years passed. 10, to be exact. And then, everything changed again. Jack's father died suddenly of a heart attack. Just like that, Jack was thrust into the role of CEO. I tried to be supportive, but I could see him struggling under the weight of his new responsibilities. 2 years after that, we got more bad news. Jack's mother had cancer. We should move her to a care facility, Jack said, his voice detached. They can take better care of her there. But his mother refused. I will die in my own home, she declared, her chin lifted defiantly. And so, drawing on my years of experience with the Cancer Foundation, I took charge of her care. I hired nurses, coordinated treatments, and spent hours by her bedside. To my surprise, Elizabeth's attitude towards me began to soften. One day, as I was adjusting her pillows, she caught my hand. "You're a good woman, Julia," she said softly. "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." I felt tears prick my eyes. "Thank you, Mrs. Caldwell." 5 years passed since Jack took over his father's company. I wish I could say things improved, but the truth was far from it. Jack's behavior became increasingly erratic. He was drinking more, coming home at odd hours, and snapping at me for the smallest things. One day, I received a call from Jack's assistant. "Mrs. Caldwell, I'm sorry to bother you, but Mr. Caldwell hasn't been to the office in days. Is everything all right?" When he finally stumbled home that night, reeking of alcohol, I confronted him. "Jack, what's happening?" "Your assistant called." "You haven't been to work?" He laughed bitterly. "Work? What's the point? The company's going under anyway." Dear old Dad left me a sinking ship, and I couldn't keep it afloat. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. All those years of hard work, gone? And Jack seemed almost relieved? Desperate to salvage something, I reached out to my father. Despite being semi-retired, he agreed to help. He offered Jack a position as his deputy, hoping to mentor him back to success. But Jack's heart wasn't in it. He showed up late, left early, and generally did the bare minimum. I watched helplessly as my father's sales figures began to drop. I knew I had to have a serious talk with Jack. One night, after he'd had a few drinks, as usual, I approached him. "Jack, we need to talk about work. You're barely showing up. My father's company is suffering because of you." Jack's face contorted with anger. "Oh, so now it's my fault? I never wanted this, Jules. Any of it. What are you talking about?" He laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "This life, this marriage. I'm just waiting for Mom to kick the bucket so I can sell her house and get out of here." I stared at him, horrified. "How can you say that? Your mother is dying, and all you care about is her money? Don't act all high and mighty," he spat. "We both know this marriage is a sham. You're just as eager to get out as I am." Disgusted, I turned to leave the room. As I opened the door, I came face to face with Jack's mother. The look on her face told me she'd heard everything. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then, silently, she reached out and squeezed my hand. In that gesture, I felt her gratitude, her understanding, and her sorrow. The day I got the call about my parents' plane crash, my world shattered. Mom and Dad, gone in an instant. Their small plane to Hawaii, meant to be a second honeymoon, became their final journey. I needed support, someone to lean on. But Jack? He was nowhere to be found. My own husband couldn't even be bothered to show up to the funeral. As I stood there, watching my parents' caskets lowered into the ground, I felt more alone than ever. After the funeral, anger began to replace my sorrow. How dare he? How could he abandon me when I needed him most? With this newfound fury fueling me, I marched into Dad's company, our company now, I supposed. The sight that greeted me when I entered Dad's old office made my blood boil. There was Jack, lounging in Dad's chair like he owned the place, barking orders like some conquering hero. "Jack," I said, my voice tight with barely contained rage. "We need to talk." He looked up, his face a mask of annoyance. "What is it now, Jules? Can't you see I'm busy?" "Busy?" I spat. "You couldn't even be busy enough to come to my parents' funeral." Jack rolled his eyes. "Oh, here we go with the moralizing again. You know what, Jules? Always nagging, always pushing. Well, I'm done with it. And I'm done with you. I stared at him, shocked. Then I saw something change in his eyes. A cold, calculating look replaced the anger. You know, Jules, he said, his voice suddenly calm. This company? It's worth about $17 million. And guess what? As deputy director, it's all mine now. My heart dropped. What are you talking about? He leaned back in the chair, Dad's chair, with a smug smile. I'm the deputy director. I have all the passwords, access to all the accounts. I'm in charge now, and there's nothing you can do about it. You can't do this, I said, my voice shaking. You've already run your father's company into the ground. I won't let you do the same to my father's legacy. Jack laughed, a cold, harsh sound. Oh, I'm not going to run it. I'm going to sell it, piece by piece. And then I'm going to live like a king. Before I could stop him, he turned to the computer. I watched in horror as he transferred a large sum from the company account to his personal one. There, he said, turning back to me. That should keep me comfortable for a while. Then, as if this whole thing was just a minor inconvenience, he reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a stack of papers. He tossed them at me casually. Oh, and here, divorce papers. I think it's time we ended this farce, don't you? I caught the papers reflexively, my mind reeling. This couldn't be happening. It was too much, too fast. My parents dead, my marriage over, my father's company being stolen right in front of me. I left the office in a daze, divorce papers clutched in my hand. But as I walked, something inside me shifted. I'd spent years bending to Jack's will, to his father's manipulations. No more. It was time to fight back. With renewed determination, I headed straight to my father's lawyer's office. Mr. Henderson had been Dad's friend and confidant for years. If anyone could help me, it would be him. Julia, Mr. Henderson said, rising to greet me as I entered his office. I'm so sorry about your parents. How are you holding up? I collapsed into the chair across from him, the events of the day spilling out in a rush. Mr. Henderson listened patiently, his expression growing grimmer by the minute. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, a small smile playing on his lips. Julia, I think it's time I shared something with you. Your father's will. He made some changes just before the accident. As he read the will, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. The company, it was mine. All mine. Dad had left it to me, not Jack. But there was more. Mr. Henderson looked up from the papers, his eyes twinkling. There's something else you should know. Your father dismissed Jack 2 weeks before his death. Fired him outright. I couldn't help it, I laughed. A real, genuine laugh for the first time in what felt like forever. So all those orders Jack was giving. Completely meaningless, Mr. Henderson confirmed. Then he pulled out an envelope. There's one more thing. A letter from your father. With shaking hands, I opened it. Dad's familiar handwriting blurred as tears filled my eyes. My dearest Julia, it began. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I'm sorry for leaving you like this, but I hope I've left you with the tools to build the life you deserve. The company is yours now. And Jules? It's time to let go of Jack. You've given enough of yourself to that marriage. It's time to live for you. I love you, sweetheart. Make me proud. I looked up at Mr. Henderson, wiping my eyes. Do you have a pen? Without a word, he handed me one. I signed the divorce papers Jack had given me, feeling lighter with each stroke of the pen. Can you file these? I asked, handing them back. I want this done as quickly as possible. Mr. Henderson nodded. Consider it done. As I left his office, I felt free. For the first time in years, maybe for the first time ever, I was in control of my own life. No more Jack, no more Caldwell's pulling my strings. On impulse, I pulled out my phone and called Sarah, my best friend from the charity foundation. Sarah? It's Julia. Want to meet for coffee? I've got some news. An hour later, we were seated in our favorite cafe, lattes in hand. So, Sarah said, eyeing me curiously. What's this big news? I took a deep breath, then let it all out. Jack, the company, the divorce. Sarah listened, her eyes widening. When I finished, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Girl, you're free. And now you're the boss. I couldn't help but smile at her enthusiasm. I don't know, Sarah. Can I really run a company? She fixed me with a stern look. Are you kidding me? Julia, you've been running that charity foundation like a pro for years. You're smart, you're organized, and you actually care about people. You're going to be an amazing CEO. After my talk with Sarah, I felt invigorated. It was time to face the music and get my things from Jack's house. I never really thought of it as my home, and now I knew why. I found my mother-in-law, Elizabeth, in the living room. Her face was drawn, tired from her ongoing battle with cancer. Elizabeth, I said gently, I'm here to get my things. Jack and I, we're getting divorced. To my surprise, her eyes filled with tears. Julia, I know I haven't always been kind to you. But you've been so good to me. Would you consider taking me with you? I was stunned. You want to come with me? Before she could answer, the front door slammed open. Jack stormed in, his face red with fury. You, he shouted, pointing at me. What the hell did you do? The company accounts are blocked. I can't access the money. I straightened my spine, looking him dead in the eye. That money isn't yours, Jack. It never was. Oh, and by the way, my father fired you 2 weeks ago. You have no claim to the company. I've already instructed security not to let you in the building. Jack's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Then his gaze shifted, noticing his mother packing a suitcase. Mom, what are you doing? Elizabeth looked at her son, her expression a mix of sadness and determination. I'm going with Julia. I'm sorry, Jack, but you've proven to be unreliable. Jack's face turned an even deeper shade of red. Unreliable? Me? This is all your fault. You raised me to be this way. You and your coddling and your expectations. He turned to me, his voice dripping with venom. Fine. Get out. Both of you. I don't need either of you. I felt a wave of pity for him. This angry, bitter man was a far cry from the charming, if irresponsible, guy I'd married. But I couldn't let that sway me. Not anymore. Come on, Elizabeth, I said softly. Let's get your things. As we packed, Jack continued to rant and rave, hurling insults and blame. But we tuned him out, focusing on the task at hand. The drive to my parents' house was quiet. Elizabeth dozed in the passenger seat, the stress of the day taking its toll. As we pulled up to the house, a lump formed in my throat. It felt strange coming here without Mom and Dad. We're here, I said softly, gently waking Elizabeth. I helped her inside, leading her to my parents' room. It felt right, somehow, to give her this space. Are you sure? Elizabeth asked, her eyes wide as she took in the room. I nodded, swallowing past the lump in my throat. Yes. I think they would have wanted it this way. As I helped Elizabeth settle in, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Grief for my parents, relief at being free from Jack, uncertainty about the future. But underneath it all, there was a glimmer of hope. Taking over Dad's company was like diving into the deep end of a pool without knowing how to swim. Those first few months were a whirlwind of meetings, financial reports, and sleepless nights. But I was determined to make it work. I hired Tom, a brilliant business consultant, as my right-hand man. He patiently guided me through the intricacies of running a multi-million-dollar company. You've got good instincts, Julia, he'd say. Trust them. Slowly but surely, I found my footing. 6 months in, I wasn't just treading water, I was swimming laps. The company's performance began to improve, and I felt a surge of pride knowing Dad would have been pleased. Through it all, I never neglected the Cancer Foundation. If anything, my work there became even more important to me. It was a link to my past and a beacon for my future. Elizabeth's condition worsened over time. I threw myself into her care, determined to make her final days as comfortable as possible. We grew close during those 2 years, healing old wounds and forming a bond one never thought possible. The day she passed, I held her hand and whispered, "Thank you for everything, Elizabeth." She squeezed my hand weakly, a small smile on her face, before slipping away peacefully. I organized the funeral myself, making sure everything was perfect. Jack didn't show up. I wasn't surprised, but it still stung to see how far he'd fallen. A few weeks after the funeral, I received a call from Mr. Henderson. "Julia, there's something you need to see. Can you come to my office?" When I arrived, I was shocked to see Jack there, a young blonde hanging off his arm. He smirked at me. "Well, if it isn't the little CEO. Don't worry, I'm just here to collect my inheritance. Mom and I might have had our differences, but blood is thicker than water, right?" I bit my tongue, waiting for Mr. Henderson to speak. The lawyer cleared his throat and began reading Elizabeth's will. As he spoke, I watched Jack's smug expression morph into disbelief, then fury. "And so, I leave my house and all my savings to Julia Thompson, with the stipulation that the money be donated to the Cancer Foundation she so passionately supports." Tears sprang to my eyes. Elizabeth's final act of kindness overwhelmed me. Jack exploded. "This is bullshit. She manipulated Mom. She's a fraud, a gold digger. She ruined my life, and now she's stealing my inheritance." His girlfriend, looking bewildered, stepped away from him. "You said we'd be set for life with this money. I'm out of here." She stormed out, leaving Jack sputtering. As I left the office, I heard Jack's continued ranting fade behind me. I felt light, free. Elizabeth's gift wasn't just about the money, it was validation. She had seen me, truly seen me, and found me worthy.
High. Enoch, bless his soul, became our guiding light. Even as he endured the harsh treatments, it was he, the one battling the illness, who could brighten our days. His laughter echoed through the house, a reminder that love and joy could thrive even in the darkest of times. Nights were our sanctuary. When the world outside our windows was silent, Enoch and I would crawl into bed, seeking solace in each other's company. We'd talk the night away, reminiscing about the old times, the moments that shaped us into the family we were. It was during these conversations that I learned the true strength of a loving partnership, and I will forever be grateful for those nights we'd share dreams, whisper hopes, and laugh about the quirks that made our love story uniquely ours. Enoch's resilience was a shining light, guiding us through this really dark period of our lives. As the years rolled on, Enoch's health didn't show any signs of improvement. The resilient man who had brought laughter into our lives now faced the brutal reality of a body that refused to heal. Yet, he was still clinging to that same happy-go-lucky spirit that had defined him all along. His smile, though strained, persisted like a flame in the wind. Inevitably, the time came when Enoch had to be in full-time intensive care. His laughter, once the song that filled our home, was replaced by the cold hum of medical equipment. Enoch lay on what seemed like his deathbed, a stark contrast to the man who'd once been the vibrant heart of our family. The atmosphere was heavy, with the grim acknowledgement of the inevitable. His once lively eyes now held a deep sadness, a reflection of the pain that engulfed him. It was crushing to witness, and the laughter that used to echo through our home was now replaced by an eerie silence. Enoch, who had always been the one to offer comfort, found himself in need of all the help he could get. His voice, once a source of joy, had become a rare occurrence. In those precious moments when words escaped his lips, he spoke to me, sharing the sweetest sentiments in the middle of the suffering and the silence. He'd say, "Christina, you've been my strength, my reason to smile even in the darkest hours. Our love has been my anchor, the only reason I've managed to last several more years with you. And I'm grateful for every shared laugh and whispered dream. You and the girls are my greatest blessings. I love you with all my heart. I would bawl my eyes out every day. There is nothing that compares to the pain of knowing that you're losing someone right in front of you. I don't think I'll ever heal from this. Enoch, the man who had faced the world with unwavering strength, now faced his own mortality. Enoch died on a Sunday morning while the kids and I were attending Mass. He had lived to be 40 and had spent his 40th birthday tied up to machines and tubes, slowly losing his life. No way to celebrate a birthday. The man who had been our rock, our source of laughter and strength, was gone. I was left wondering, how would life go on without Enoch's laughter echoing through the halls of our home? I just couldn't fathom the idea of navigating this world without the love of my life by my side. I still can't. Patricia, Enoch's mother, arrived at the hospital to find her son dead. The sight was agonizing, a mother's worst nightmare realized. In the middle of this heart-wrenching scene, I reached out to comfort my grief-stricken mother-in-law. But what happened next shocked everyone in the room. Patricia violently pushed me out of the way. For a moment, I thought it was just grief consuming her. But then she said, "Get away from me. This is all your fault." What? My fault? I knew that this wasn't going anywhere good, so I said, "Girls, go outside for a moment." The girls hesitated, but sensing our need for privacy, left the room, leaving me alone to face the unexpected storm. "What's going on, Patricia? This is all your fault. Enoch worked himself into an early grave, always trying to provide for you and those greedy kids of yours. I've always hated you. You've taken the one thing that I loved in this life. I will never forgive you for this." I know that this is a lot. I'm sorry. Did one of your girls die today? No. Then how could you possibly know what I'm going through? I think we all need to take a deep breath and just... No, I think that you need to leave. You and your vermin have no right being here. Get out, all of you. I'm not leaving. The girls and I aren't done saying our goodbyes. No, you have to go now. To say I was shocked would be an understatement. I didn't know why Patricia was attacking me like this. I know that grief makes people react in crazy ways, but I was never expecting anything like this. I felt kind of silly for telling the girls to go out. I'm pretty sure they heard everything. Patricia's yelling escalated, and I'm sure the whole hospital could hear her at that point. Concerned hospital attendants warned that if she didn't calm down, security would be called to escort her out. But Patricia, lost in her own anger, refused to listen to the warnings. Security guards arrived shortly after, firm and composed, attempting to guide Patricia out of the hospital. As she was being escorted out, she was yelling and screaming, cursing out all of us, including her own grandchildren, and humiliating us in front of everyone. After Patricia's dramatic exit from the hospital, I was left standing there completely dumbfounded. I was filled with confusion and sadness. How did a moment of grief and mourning turn into a raging blame game? It felt like a nightmare, and I couldn't wake up. Later in the day, I decided to approach Patricia at her home, hoping that with time, she would have calmed down and come to her senses. We needed to discuss the funeral arrangements, support each other through this tragedy, and try to make sense of the chaos that had ensued. So, getting through to her sooner rather than later was a good call. I got inside her home with my spare key because she wasn't answering the door, but I knew she was home because her car was in the driveway, and found her in the kitchen. "Patricia, can we talk? What the hell are you doing here? I don't want you in my home, you murderer." "Patricia, I'm hurting too. What is going on with you? Get out." "Not before we talk." "Talk? What's there to talk about? My son is dead because of you." I might have let this whole blame game slide at the hospital, but not any longer. It was getting out of control, and I couldn't understand why she was fixed on me as the cause of Enoch's death. "Patricia, please. I loved Enoch as much as you did. Blaming me won't bring him back. We need to support each other through this, not tear each other apart. I know you're hurting. Let me get you some tea, and we can start to talk about the funeral." "I don't want you at the funeral." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My heart ached with grief for Enoch, and now I had to endure this crap from his own mother? Like going through all of this wasn't enough. "Why do you keep saying that?" "What do you mean?" "I mean exactly that. You are not allowed to come to the funeral because you are the reason for his death. Now get the hell out of my house. After this big fight with Patricia, first at the hospital and now in her home, I felt like crap. Grief was already hitting hard, and now I had to deal with my mother-in-law accusing me of something I didn't do. I drove home in total silence, my mind all over the place. When I got back home, I put on a fake happy face for my daughters and said everything was cool. But inside, I was actually scared. I just didn't get why Patricia was treating me like garbage all of a sudden, and I had no clue what she'd pull next. The next morning, I woke up to a message in the family group chat. Patricia officially banned me from the funeral and said that the funeral would be happening on the weekend. This was on a Wednesday. I knew I had to sort this crap out with Patricia, but first, I had to meet with Enoch's lawyers to discuss the will. I wasn't even in the mood to go because going in that office would make everything seem so real, like he was truly gone. But I had to do what was right to protect me and my family. I had to step up. So, I went to the lawyer's office and I was in for a total shock. You see, I figured that Enoch would divide things up evenly between his mother and me. But when I saw Enoch's will, big surprise, he left everything to me. Not only that, but he had left me this mansion he had been working on before he fell ill. He said that this mansion would be his greatest work, one where all of his grandchildren could roam around freely. I sat there staring at the papers, feeling grateful, but guilty. I asked the lawyer about what had happened because I thought that this would be the plan from the beginning. But the lawyer told me that Enoch had updated his will when he first got sick. I don't know what to say. All right, so after settling things at the lawyer's office, I decided to head over to Patricia's place once again to clear the air and to get to the bottom of why she was being so evil. I knocked on her door like 1,000,000 times, but she wasn't answering. Now, her car was parked right there, so I knew she was home, just like the last time. I was hesitant to walk in again, like last time, but I had been knocking for ages, and I started getting scared. Anxiety started creeping in. What if something happened to her? I mean, she was an old lady. What if she fell down or something? I used my spare key, opened the door, and called out for Patricia. No response. I went upstairs and looked around. Nada. Downstairs, I spotted a document on the coffee table. Enoch's name caught my eye, so I dove in. What I read ticked me off. Big time. Patricia was scheming to snatch the mansion away from me. Seriously. The document was detailing some lawsuit where she wanted to sue me for ownership of the house, stating that I had no business owning the house and a bunch of other legal jargon I couldn't understand. I was beyond surprised. I snapped pictures of that snake of a document and stormed out, fuming. Got home, sat down, and called up the family lawyers to discuss what I had just seen. I asked if they knew anything about this at all. They were clueless, but one of them mentioned a past convo between Patricia and Enoch about the mansion. Apparently, according to him, Patricia begged Enoch to hand the house over, telling him he had enough houses as it is, but he shut her down. Back then, he chalked it up to just typical family banter, you know? But with this context, and after telling them how she forbade me from attending the funeral, it seemed like Patricia had some grand plan in the works. I thanked the lawyers and decided to confront Patricia. I called her since she clearly wasn't at her house. After 3 calls in a row, finally, she picked up. What do you want? I'm doing good, thanks for asking. You know, that's what normal people say when they pick up the phone. Stop bothering me. You want to send me to an early grave just like you did with my son. You're stressing me out. I have a funeral to plan, which you're not invited to. Need I remind you? So stop asking because I know you've come to bother me about that. Patricia, we need to talk about this lawsuit I found in your house. What's the deal? She played dumb at first, but I wasn't falling for it. Then, after some prying, she finally spilled it. She felt entitled to the mansion and thought it should have been hers from the get-go. She claimed Enoch promised it to her way back and that it was rightfully hers. I wasn't buying it. Enoch and I talked about the mansion, and he wanted it to be ours. That was always the plan, a family thing. So I called Patricia out on her lies and told her about what the lawyer said, and she started acting all flustered, silence on her end. And then Patricia tried to twist it, saying Enoch changed his mind, or maybe he didn't tell me everything. She was desperate. I shot back and told her that this wasn't going to fly, and that Enoch's wish was for us to have the mansion together. Patricia got defensive, accusing me of greed and emphasizing that I didn't deserve the house because I was the reason Enoch died. I hung up. There was no point arguing with someone who was not even in the same reality. And I realized the truth at that moment, the reason why she wanted to paint me out to be the bad guy. I called the lawyers again, gave them the rundown, and they said they'd look into it. They assured me that Enoch's will was solid, that Patricia didn't have a leg to stand on, and that any judge she tried to bring this case to would probably yell at her for wasting their time. Still, the whole thing left a nasty taste. Patricia was not the woman I thought she was. Now, with the funeral around the corner, I had to brace myself for whatever she'd pull next. The weekend rolled around, and it was time for Enoch's funeral. I sent the girls ahead with their aunt, telling them I'd join later. The plan, to catch Patricia off guard, make her think I wouldn't show. Just before the funeral kicked off and everyone was settled, I had arrived at the venue, perfectly timing everything, and walked in, throwing everyone, especially Patricia, for a loop. She made a big show of telling everyone I wasn't welcome, but here I was, defying her dramatic proclamation. Patricia was in the middle of her over-the-top eulogy, shedding what seemed like buckets of fake tears. My sweet baby boy, oh how I'm going to miss you. Everyone else might have been buying it, but I couldn't care less. I strolled up to the podium, wiped the mic from her hands, and began to speak. I began by sharing my love for Enoch and told the folks gathered there that there's no way I'd miss his funeral, even if it meant losing everything I've ever had. Tears were rolling down my cheeks, but I powered through it, recounting the precious moments I shared with my husband and sharing them with his loved ones. But as my speech neared the end, I decided it was time to address the elephant in the room. I looked straight at Patricia and laid it out. Patty, I know you've got your own version of reality, accusing me, blaming me for everything. At first I thought you were just going crazy from the amount of grief you had, but let's get one thing straight. Enoch loved me, and he wanted us to share everything, including this mansion that you're so obsessed with. His will says it all, and I've got the documents to prove it. Some folks looked shocked, others just uncomfortable. Patricia was fuming, but I didn't back down. I told everyone how Patricia tried to rewrite the story, turn me into the villain so that suing me for the house would make things easier for her. I mean, if she could blame me for Enoch's death, she could twist anything and everything she wanted in her favor. Maybe she thought I would give her the house to shut her up or out of shame or guilt, as she was trying to gaslight me. Whatever her reasons were, I wasn't having any of it. That's ridiculous. You think I would do all of this just for a house? After seeing your true colors? Yes, I do. I proceeded to share the document I had on the family group so that people in the pews could see that this was her plan all along. I revealed what the lawyer told me about Patricia being angry when Enoch wouldn't give her the mansion. People in the crowd began murmuring in disappointment, with some of Christina's siblings scolding her for what she was doing. This is when she started to crumble, making excuses and saying that she was just upset because she wanted at least something left behind for her in the will. So, that's all you were worried about? The stuff, not the fact that your own son died a terrible death? No, that's not it at all. Then why are you trying to pin the blame on me, huh? Why do you insist on suing me for the house? Because... Save it, Patty. Everyone can now see who you truly are. I'm just glad that Enoch isn't here to see it. It would completely crush him. I finished my speech, handed the mic back like the boss I am, and walked to where my daughters were sitting and hugged them. I could feel Patricia's angry glare burning holes in my back, but I didn't let it get to me. She looked more embarrassed than anything, and I was glad that she was feeling that way because how she treated me was awful. Enoch deserved better, and I was going to make sure his memory was respected no matter what Patricia threw my way. Naturally, after laying it all out for Patricia, the funeral proceeded with a thick layer of awkwardness and tension. The pastor took over, sharing some Bible verses and trying to bring back the somber mood. But after my little speech, it was clear things wouldn't be the same, and I got the people talking. After the burial and service, it was time to meet at Patricia's house so people could get some refreshments and continue to mourn. I was about to take my girls with me and go back to our home since we clearly weren't welcomed after that debacle, but something strange happened. I noticed a bunch of people coming up to me. They asked if we could continue the memorial at my home instead of Patricia's. Apparently, my words resonated with them, and some even shared stories about sour encounters with Patricia, saying her antics were shocking but unfortunately not surprising. They apologized for Patricia's behavior, expressing their support for me and the kids. Patricia finally noticed people rallying to my side and got furious. She tried to redirect them to her house, but they weren't having it. My friends and family decided they'd rather be at my place. Patricia stormed off, feeling defeated and embarrassed, I'm sure. And honestly, I couldn't have cared less. This was about Inas and honoring his memory, not about Patricia's ego trip. At my house, we continued the memorial. People shared stories, laughed, and cried. It was a beautiful mess of emotions, but it felt right. Patricia's attempt to control the narrative had failed, and the truth was out there for everyone to see. I couldn't help but feel grateful for the support from those who believed me. Patricia's bitterness might have cast a dark shadow, but the love and memories we shared with Enoch came out strong in the end. And in a strange way, it felt like Enoch was with us, guiding us through the storm his mother had tried to create. As for Patricia, she's kind of unofficially shunned from the family. She's tried reaching out to some of the family members to get some sympathy, but all they've done is report it to me and leave her on red. So, that's my story, folks. Let me know what you think about it. Do you think I should reach out to her? Do you think that she deserves a second chance? Thanks for listening to my story, you all.
I stared at the cream-colored envelope that someone had slipped under my door. My stomach doing that weird flip it does when you know something's not quite right. No name, no return address, just my apartment number written in precise, angular handwriting. My name is Tessa, and until this moment, I'd been having what I thought was the best month of my life. My fitness blog had just hit 100,000 subscribers, my relationship with Nolan was getting serious, and I was finally going to meet his family this weekend. Well, officially meet them. But this letter changed everything. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the same precise handwriting. If you care about your future with Nolan, be careful around his mother. She's destroyed relationships before, and you're next on her list. Don't say you weren't warned. I read it 3 times, my hands shaking more with each pass. The paper felt expensive, the kind you'd find in a fancy stationery store. My phone buzzed, making me jump. Nolan's face lit up my screen. "Hey, beautiful, just checking in about Saturday," his warm voice filled my ear. "Mom's really excited to meet you properly." I swallowed hard, crumpling the letter in my free hand. "Yeah, about that. Please tell me you're not backing out," he said, that edge of anxiety creeping into his voice. "You know how important this is to me." I glanced at the crumpled warning in my hand. No, I'm still coming. Just nervous, I guess." "Don't be. They're going to love you." "Well, Drew already does. He won't shut up about your workout videos." I forced a laugh, but my mind was racing. Drew, Nolan's younger brother, was the only family member I'd met so far. He'd seemed genuine friendly. Could he have sent this? "Tess? You still there?" "Sorry, just thinking about what to wear," I lied. "Your mom seems traditional. I want to make a good impression." There was a slight pause. "Just be yourself. That's who I fell in love with." After we hung up, I smoothed out the letter and took a photo, sending it to my mom. Within minutes, my phone rang. "Have you told Nolan?" Mom asked, skipping hello. "Not yet. I don't want to start drama before I even meet his family." "Honey, this is drama. Someone's trying to warn you." "Or mess with me," I countered, but my voice lacked conviction. "Maybe it's just a prank. That paper is Crane and Company, I'd recognize it anywhere. That's not prank material, that's serious money." Mom had worked at a high-end paper store for years. Someone from their social circle sent this. I sank onto my couch, the reality of the situation hitting me. "Mom, what do I do?" "You go to that dinner. You watch, you listen, and you trust your gut." "But Tessa," her voice got serious, "don't show your hand. If someone felt strongly enough to warn you, there's a reason." After we hung up, I pulled up the Fisher family photos Nolan had shown me. There was Meredith Fisher, his mother, elegant and poised in every shot. Her smile never quite reached her eyes, especially in the photos with Nolan's previous girlfriend. Come to think of it, I'd never heard why they broke up. My phone buzzed again, a text from Drew. "Fair warning, Mom's planning to go full Martha Stewart on Saturday. Hope you're ready for the 3rd degree about your internet career, grinning face with sweat." I started typing a response, then stopped. Was this his way of warning me too? I looked at the letter again, then at my phone. Everyone was trying to tell me something without really telling me anything. Well, game on, Meredith Fisher. If she wanted to play puppet master with her son's life, she was about to learn I wasn't the kind of girl who danced on anyone's strings. I just hoped I wasn't making a huge mistake by walking straight into whatever she had planned. The Fisher house loomed before me, all red brick and pristine white columns. I smoothed my dress for the 10th time, wishing I'd worn something less fitted. Next to me, Nolan squeezed my hand. "Ready?" he asked, reaching for the brass knocker. Before he could touch it, the door swung open. Meredith Fisher stood there, perfectly coiffed in a cream cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "You must be Tessa," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "We've heard so much about your internet activities." I felt Nolan tense beside me. Mom, Tessa's fitness channel has over 100,000 followers. She's built a real business. How fascinating, Meredith replied, stepping aside. Though I always thought personal training was more of a hobby than a career. The warning letter flashed through my mind as I followed them into a living room that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Everything was pristine, controlled just like Meredith. Drew appeared from the kitchen, grinning. Hey, the famous Tessa. Mom, did you know she was featured in Women's Health last month? Was she? Meredith's voice could have frozen water. I must have missed that issue. I prefer more traditional publications. Throughout dinner, every compliment came with a barb. My healthy eating tips were trendy fads. My business model was risky. Even my wine choice earned a raised eyebrow and a murmured, "How modern." So, Tessa, Meredith said as she served dessert, Nolan mentioned you grew up in Rochester? With just your mother? Yes, after my dad passed away. Oh, how difficult that must have been. Her sympathy dripped like poison honey. Although I suppose that explains your need to be so independent. Nolan suddenly became very interested in his creme brulee. Actually, I said, maintaining eye contact with Meredith, my mom taught me that independence isn't about being alone, it's about choosing your own path. Indeed. Meredith set down her spoon with a delicate clink. Though, in my experience, family traditions provide a much more stable foundation than experimental lifestyle choices. Mom, Drew interrupted, didn't you say you wanted to show Tessa the garden? Of course. Meredith stood, gesturing for me to follow. Nolan, help your brother clear the table. In the moonlit garden, Meredith stopped by a rose bush. These have been in the Fisher family for generations. Spring, they bloom exactly as expected. No surprises, no disappointments. They're beautiful, I said carefully. But sometimes unexpected growth can create something even more spectacular. She turned to face me fully. Let me be clear, Tessa. My sons are my life. I've guided them, shaped them, protected them from unfortunate influences. I won't see that work undone by someone who thinks life is a series of Instagram stories. Mrs. Fisher. Please, she cut me off with a razor smile. Call me Meredith. We're practically family. For now. Back inside, I found Nolan in the kitchen. Your mother just threatened me. What? No, she wouldn't. She basically said I'm not good enough for you and won't last. Nolan ran a hand through his hair. That's not what she meant. Mom's just traditional. Give her time. Traditional. I laughed incredulously. Nolan, she's actively trying to undermine our relationship. You're being sensitive. She's making an effort. Like hell she is. My voice rose before I could stop it. Everything okay in here? Drew appeared in the doorway, concern etched on his face. Fine, Nolan said quickly. Tessa's just tired. We should probably head out. In the car, the silence was deafening. Finally, I spoke. You're not going to stand up to her, are you? There's nothing to stand up to. You don't understand our family dynamic. You're right, I cut him off. I don't understand how you can let her treat people this way. But I'm starting to understand why your last girlfriend left. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. That was different. Was it? I stared out the window, the anonymous letter's warning echoing in my head. Or was she just smart enough to get out before your mother destroyed everything? Nolan didn't answer, and I realized with crushing clarity that I was on my own in this battle. But Meredith Fisher had no idea who she was dealing with. If she wanted war, I'd give her one hell of a fight. Comments started appearing on my blog 3 days after the dinner. First, they seemed random criticisms about my form, questioning my credentials, suggesting my advice was dangerous for impressionable young women. But as I scrolled through them, a pattern emerged. A proper lady maintains dignity, not followers. Some traditions exist for a reason. Family values are more important than fleeting internet fame. Each comment echoed Meredith's words from dinner down to her exact phrasing. I was checking the IP addresses when my phone buzzed, Drew calling. "Have you seen Mom's browser history?" he asked without preamble. "What?" I borrowed her laptop to check email. She forgot to clear her history. "Tessa, she's been watching every single one of your videos, reading every blog post. She's obsessed." My hands started shaking. The comments. Probably her. Listen, there's more. "Remember Caroline, Nolan's ex? Mom did the same thing to her. Started with small criticisms, then escalated to contacting Caroline's employers with concerns about her character. Caroline quit her job and moved to Seattle." I sat down hard. Does Nolan know? He suspects, but Mom's good at playing victim. If anyone confronts her, she breaks down about how she's just trying to protect her family. A notification popped up on my laptop, another comment. "Some people mistake attention-seeking for success. Sad to see young women led astray by social media validation. Drew, she's going to try to destroy my business." I know. That's why I'm warning you. But be careful. If you confront her, she'll make you look like the aggressor. After we hung up, I pulled up my latest video. Comment section was flooded with new criticisms, all in that same proper, cutting tone. My phone buzzed again. "Nolan. Hey, can we talk? Mom's upset about something you posted." I laughed incredulously. "You mean the dozens of nasty comments she's leaving on my content?" "What?" "No, she mentioned a video where you're apparently promoting unhealthy body standards. She's worried about your influence on young women." Are you serious right now? Your mother is actively trying to sabotage my career, and you're buying her concerned act? Look, maybe if you just talk to her. I did talk to her. She threatened me in her garden, remember? The garden you refused to believe she threatened me in? Silence on his end. Then she's just protective. Stop making excuses. I was shouting now. Your mother is systematically trying to destroy everything I've built, just like she did to Caroline. And you're letting her. Don't bring Caroline into this. Why not? Because it proves I'm right? Because you know exactly what your mother's capable of and you're too scared to stand up to her? The doorbell rang. Through my apartment's peephole, I saw Meredith Fisher herself, perfectly composed in another expensive sweater. "Nolan, I have to go. Your mother's here." "What?" "No, wait." I hung up and opened the door. Meredith smiled that razor smile. "Tessa, dear, I thought we should have a chat about your recent content choices." "You mean the content you've been obsessively commenting on?" Her smile didn't waver. "I'm simply expressing concern about the message you're sending. As Nolan's mother, you're terrified of losing control. That's what this is really about, isn't it?" Something flickered in her eyes. Fear? Rage? "You don't understand our family." "No, I understand perfectly. You destroyed Caroline's career to keep control of Nolan. Now you're trying to do the same to me. But here's the difference." I stepped closer. "I'm not Caroline. And if you want a war, I'll give you one. Are you threatening me?" "No, Meredith. I'm promising you that if you don't back off, I'll expose exactly who you are. To Nolan, to your precious social circle, to everyone." Her composure cracked just for a second. "You wouldn't dare. Try me. Now get out of my apartment." After she left, my hands were shaking so bad I could barely text Drew. "Your mother just showed up." Things just got real. His response came quickly. "Check your email. There's something you need to see about Mom's past." I opened my laptop, my heart pounding. Whatever Drew had found, it was time to turn the tables on Meredith Fisher. I met Drew at a coffee shop across town, far from his mother's usual haunts. He looked exhausted, sliding a manila envelope across the table before I could even sit down. "I found these in Mom's study," he said quietly. "In a locked drawer behind her desk. Inside were newspaper clippings, yellowed with age. The headlines jumped out. Local woman missing after domestic dispute. Search continues for Margaret Fisher. Fisher family maintains silence on disappearance." Margaret Fisher? My hands trembled as I spread the clippings across the table. Our aunt. Mom's sister. Drew's voice dropped lower. The one nobody talks about. The articles painted a disturbing picture. 25 years ago, Margaret Fisher had vanished after a public argument with her family. Police investigated but found nothing. Case went cold. "There's more," Drew said, pulling out a stack of letters. "These are from Margaret to Mom, sent over the years. Mom kept them all but never responded." I scanned the letters. They were desperate pleas for reconciliation, each one more heartbreaking than the last. What happened between them? Drew glanced around the cafe before answering. Margaret fell in love with someone the family didn't approve of. A woman. Mom couldn't handle it. She threatened to expose Margaret to their social circle, their father's business partners. Back then, it would have ruined everything. So Margaret left? She chose freedom over family. Mom never forgave her for breaking ranks. Drew's hands clenched around his coffee cup. That's when Mom started, controlling everything. She was terrified Nolan and I would leave too. My phone buzzed, Nolan calling again. I declined it. Does he know about any of this? Drew shook his head. Mom told us Margaret died in an accident. I only found out the truth when I found these letters. That's why you've been helping me. The realization hit hard. You don't want history repeating itself. Mom's already destroyed one family. I won't let her destroy another. He pulled out one final letter, newer than the others. This came last week. Margaret's in Seattle now. She's been following your blog, saw you were dating Nolan. She wants to meet. My heart pounded. Does Meredith know? No, but... Drew's eyes widened, focusing on something behind me. Shit. I turned to see Meredith Fisher standing in the doorway of the cafe, her face white with fury. Our eyes met across the room. Drew, she said, her voice carrying clearly across the quiet space. What are you doing? Mom, are these my private papers? She approached our table, each step measured and precise. You broke into my study? You broke into my life, I shot back, standing to face her. Harassed me online, threatened my business. To protect my family. Her composure cracked. You have no idea what's at stake. I know about Margaret, I said quietly. Color drained from her face. You don't know anything. I know you drove your own sister away because you couldn't control her. Just like you did with Caroline. Just like you're trying to do with me. Mom, Drew stood too, Margaret's alive. She wants to talk. Enough. Meredith's hand slammed down on the letters. These are private family matters, which makes them my business, Nolan's voice cut through the tension. We all turned to see him standing there, holding his phone. Drew called me before you arrived, Mom. I heard everything. The look on Meredith's face, shock, betrayal, fear, would have been satisfying if it wasn't so tragic. She grabbed for the letters, but I was faster, snatching them away. Your choice, Meredith, I said softly. We can all talk about this like adults, or these letters go public. Margaret's story, Caroline's story, everything. You wouldn't dare. Try me. I met her gaze steadily. But first, you need to tell Nolan the truth. All of it. Cafe had gone silent, other patrons pretending not to watch our family drama unfold. Meredith looked from me to her sons, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. Finally, she sank into a chair, her shoulders sagging. I was trying to protect you, she whispered. No, Mom, Nolan said firmly. You were trying to control us. And it stops now. The Seattle rain matched my mood as I waited outside the small cafe where Margaret Fisher had agreed to meet. After the confrontation with Meredith, everything felt raw, unfinished. Nolan hadn't spoken to his mother in days, and the silence was deafening. A woman approached, and I knew immediately it was Margaret. She had Meredith's elegant posture, but her eyes were kinder, less guarded. She wore a rainbow pin on her jacket, a small act of defiance that spoke volumes. You must be Tessa, she said, extending her hand. Thank you for meeting me. Inside over coffee, Margaret studied me carefully. You look shell-shocked. I remember that look. I used to see it in the mirror every morning before I left. Did you know about Caroline? I asked. The girlfriend before me? I followed the Fisher family drama from afar. Meredith's patterns are predictable. She pulled out her phone, showing me a social media profile. This is my partner, Helen. We've been together 23 years. Longer than Meredith's been pretending I'm dead. My phone buzzed, another text from Nolan. We need to talk about Mom. I ignored it. Why reach out now? Because history's repeating itself, and I'm tired of watching from the sidelines. Margaret leaned forward. But also because you're different. You're fighting back. Not very successfully. You got my nephew to finally stand up to his mother. That's more than anyone's managed in decades. She paused. But there's something you should know about the night I left. Before she could continue, the cafe door chimed. Drew rushed in, looking panicked. Aunt Margaret? His voice cracked. Mom said you were dead. Margaret's composure wavered. Hello, Drew. You were so small when. Tessa, Drew cut in. Mom's at your apartment. She's threatening to call your fitness certification board with concerns about your methods. She's spiraling. My blood ran cold. She wouldn't. She already has the number pulled up. Says if you don't back off about Margaret, she'll destroy your career. Margaret's face hardened. Some things never change. When I left, she threatened to out me to every potential employer in the state. Did she follow through? I asked. No. 'Cause I left first. Disappeared completely. Margaret's eyes met mine. But running isn't the answer. It just gives her more power. My phone buzzed again, Nolan. Mom's losing it. Please call me. I need to stop her, I said, standing. Wait. Margaret grabbed my arm. There's something else you need to know. The night I left, Meredith didn't just threaten me. She threatened herself. Said she'd rather die than see the family name ruined. I thought she was manipulating me, but what? I found her with pills. That's why I left so suddenly. I couldn't bear the guilt if so I disappeared instead. Let her tell everyone I was dead. It was easier than facing the truth, that my sister would rather die than accept me. Drew sank into a chair, face pale. Mom tried to. She's not evil, Drew. She's broken. Terrified of losing control because she never dealt with almost losing everything. Margaret's voice softened. But enabling her fear isn't helping anyone. My phone lit up with a text from my mom. Meredith Fisher just called me. Says she's concerned about your mental health. What's going on? Pieces clicked together. Meredith wasn't just attacking my career, she was trying to discredit me completely. Make any accusations I made sound like the ravings of an unstable person. I have to go, I said, gathering my things. But first, Margaret, would you be willing to come with me? To see Meredith? After all these years, to save her from herself, and maybe save this family in the process. Margaret stared at her coffee cup for a long moment. The last time I saw my sister, she was willing to die to maintain her perfect facade. What makes you think this time will be different? I pulled out the anonymous warning letter that had started everything. Because someone in this family cared enough to warn me. Someone wants this cycle to end. Drew's eyes widened with recognition. The letter. Mom wrote it herself, didn't she? Part of her wants to be stopped. Margaret stood, straightening her jacket. Well then, let's go stop her. Together. As we left the cafe, I realized we were either about to heal this family or tear it apart completely. Either way, there was no turning back now. We found Meredith in my apartment, sitting primly on my couch like she owned it. The certification board's number glowed on her phone screen, her finger hovering over the call button. When she saw Margaret, she dropped the phone like it had burned her. "No," she whispered. "This isn't. You can't be here." Margaret stepped forward. "Hello, Mir." "Don't call me that. You lost that right when you abandoned this family." "Like you abandoned me?" Margaret's voice cracked. "When you chose your reputation over your own sister?" Meredith's hands started shaking. "I was protecting us." "You were protecting yourself," I cut in. "Just like you're doing now. But look around, Meredith. Your perfect family? It's falling apart because of you, not me." "You don't understand," she said, standing. "None of you understand what I've sacrificed." "We found the letter," Drew said quietly. "The warning letter about yourself. You wanted someone to stop you, didn't you, Mom?" Color drained from Meredith's face. "I never." "I didn't." "Yes, you did." Margaret moved closer. "Just like that night with the pills. Part of you has always been screaming for help, Mir. I just didn't know how to hear it then." Suddenly, Nolan burst through the door. "Mom, what are you?" He froze, seeing Margaret. "Who?" "Your aunt," I said softly. "The one your mother erased." Meredith lunged for her phone. "This ends now. I'm calling the board. I'm calling everyone. I'll tell them all what kind of person you really are, Tessa. How you turn my family against me." "Mom, stop." Nolan grabbed for the phone, but Meredith jerked away. "In the struggle," she stumbled, catching herself on my desk. Papers scattered, and something fell, the framed photo of my father and me taken just before he died. The glass shattered. Everything stopped. I stared at the broken frame, at my father's smiling face behind spiderwebbed cracks. "You know what's funny?" My voice sounded distant, even to myself. "I actually understood you, Meredith. Losing my dad made me understand why someone might be terrified of losing their family. Why they'd do anything to hold on. Tessa." Nolan started. "But this." I gestured at the chaos around us. "This isn't protecting family. It's destroying it. And I'm done." "What do you mean, done?" Nolan asked, fear creeping into his voice. "I mean I'm done fighting. Done trying to prove myself worthy of your family." I picked up the broken frame. "My father taught me that love shouldn't hurt like this. It shouldn't leave you broken. You're leaving." Meredith's voice held a note of triumph. "Just like Margaret. Running away when things get hard." "No, Meredith. I'm not running. I'm choosing peace. And if that means walking away from someone I love because his mother would rather destroy me than accept me." I looked at Nolan. "Then that's what I have to do." "Tessa, please." Nolan reached for me, but I stepped back. "When your mother threatened your aunt's happiness, you lost a sister," I said to Meredith. "When she threatened Caroline's career, you lost your son's trust. Now you're about to lose him completely. Is your control worth that much?" Meredith sank onto the couch, her carefully constructed walls crumbling. "I just wanted to keep your family close." Margaret finished. "Look how well that worked." I grabbed my keys and jacket. "I'll be at my mom's. You all figure out what kind of family you want to be. But I won't be your casualty in the process." "Where are you going?" Drew asked. "To pick up the pieces of my life before your mother can destroy them completely." I paused at the door. You know what's ironic? That warning letter? It wasn't just a cry for help, Meredith. It was your last chance to choose love over fear. And you failed. Again. As I walked out, I heard Meredith start to cry deep, broken sobs that spoke of decades of pain. Part of me wanted to turn back, to help heal this broken family. But sometimes I realized walking away isn't giving up. Sometimes it's the only way to force people to face their own demons. I just hoped Nolan would understand someday why I had to go. 3 days after I walked out, Drew called. Mom's in the hospital. She took pills. The world tilted sideways. History repeating itself, just like Margaret had warned. I found myself running down sterile hospital corridors, the antiseptic smell burning my nose. Nolan stood outside the room, looking lost. She left this for you, he said, holding out an envelope. Inside was a yellowed letter dated 25 years ago. My dearest Meredith, it began. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. The shame of your father's gambling debts, the loss of our social standing. I can't bear it. Protect our family name. Never let anyone tear apart what remains of our legacy. Love, Mother. She found this after her mother's suicide, Nolan said quietly. The day before Margaret told her about Helen. Pieces clicked together, Meredith's obsession with control, her fear of scandal, her desperate need to maintain appearances. She'd been trying to prevent another family tragedy, but had nearly caused one instead. Margaret appeared from the room, eyes red. She's asking for you, Tessa. Me. Says she needs to show you something. Inside, Meredith looked small against the white sheets. On her lap lay a familiar cream-colored envelope, the warning letter I'd received months ago. I wrote it, she whispered. The morning after Nolan told me he was bringing you to dinner. I saw myself in you. Your independence, your strength. Everything I gave up to become what my mother wanted. Why warn me, then try to destroy me? Because you terrified me. Her hands trembled. You were everything I could have been if I'd been brave enough. Like Margaret was brave. I thought if I could break you, prove you were weak, you'd prove you made the right choice all those years ago? She nodded, tears falling. But watching you fight for your place in this family, watching you refuse to break, you showed me what real strength looks like. Not control. Not manipulation. Just truth. Mom, Nolan stepped forward. Why didn't you ever tell us about grandmother? About any of it? Because admitting it meant facing what I'd become. What I almost drove Margaret to. She reached for her sister's hand. What I almost did to myself. Twice. The pills, Margaret said softly. Both times you weren't trying to die. You were trying to feel something real. Meredith's facade cracked completely. I'm so tired of being perfect, of being strong, of being her. I moved to the bedside, taking her other hand. Then stop. Be yourself instead. I don't know how anymore. Yes, you do, I said firmly. You showed me when you wrote that warning letter. When part of you tried to save me from you. Can you ever forgive me? That depends. Can you forgive yourself? For Margaret? For Caroline? For everything you've done trying to be someone you're not? She looked at her sister, then her sons. I want to try. I want to be real again. Then let's start with the truth, I said, pulling out my phone. All those nasty comments on my blog? You're going to apologize. Publicly. Show everyone that Meredith Fisher isn't afraid of admitting her mistakes. A flash of the old fear crossed her face, but then, surprisingly, she laughed. You know what? That sounds liberating. Drew appeared in the doorway. The doctor says Mom can go home tomorrow. If someone stays with her. I will, Margaret said. We have 25 years to catch up on. Meredith squeezed my hand. I tried to break you because I was already broken. But you helped put this family back together instead. We're not fully fixed yet, I said, looking at Nolan. But maybe now we can try. For real this time. As I left the hospital that night, I realized sometimes the greatest act of revenge isn't destroying your enemy, it's helping them become who they were always meant to be. 6 months later, I stood in the Fisher Garden, watching Margaret and Helen help Meredith plant new roses. Different varieties this time, wild, unpredictable blooms that would transform the precise rose into something more natural, more real. Still can't believe Mom's hosting Pride Brunch next month, Drew said, joining me. Helen's already planned the menu. People can surprise you. I smiled, remembering Meredith's public apology video on my blog. It had gone viral, sparking conversations about family acceptance and mental health that reached far beyond our little drama. Nolan appeared from the house, carrying the restored photo of my father. The frame was different now, less perfect, more interesting. Like us. Mom found this in the attic, he said, handing me a small box. Inside was a pressed rose and another letter, dated the day after I'd left the hospital. Dear Tessa, it read. I spent my life trying to be the perfect mother, following a script written by my own mother's fears. You showed me that real love doesn't follow a script. It adapts, grows, sometimes blooms in unexpected places. Thank you for helping me find my voice again. Love, Meredith. She wrote it that night, Nolan explained, but was too scared to send it. And now she's learning that scary things can be beautiful too. He took my hand. Like us. We'd taken things slow after the hospital, rebuilding trust one conversation at a time. It hadn't been easy, real things rarely are. But watching Meredith laugh as Helen taught her to deadhead roses, seeing the genuine joy in her face, made everything worth it. Caroline called last week, Drew mentioned casually. After she saw Mom's video, they talked for hours. Really? Mom apologized. Actually apologized, not just that passive-aggressive sorry not sorry thing she used to do. He grinned. Caroline's coming to Pride Brunch too. Meredith approached, dirt on her designer gardening gloves, looking more alive than I'd ever seen her. Tessa, dear, would you help me with something? In her study, she opened the drawer that had once held Margaret's letters. Now it held something else, a stack of cards and letters from people who'd seen her video, sharing their own stories of family reconciliation. I answer each one, she said softly. It helps somehow. Knowing our mess of a family might help others find their way back to each other. It's not a mess anymore, I said. It's just real. Because of you. You could have destroyed me, exposed me. Instead, she touched the letters gently. You helped me destroy the person I was pretending to be. Best revenge ever, I teased. She laughed, a real laugh, not the polite society chuckle she'd once perfected. Indeed. Though I do miss my perfectly ordered rose garden sometimes. No, you don't. No, she agreed, smiling. I don't. Outside, Margaret and Helen were teaching Nolan some complicated dance steps on the lawn, while Drew recorded it all, probably for his new family history project. Not the sanitized version Meredith had once maintained, but the messy, beautiful truth. My phone buzzed, a comment notification on my latest blog post about family healing. From Caroline, thank you for breaking the cycle. Some traditions deserve to die so new ones can bloom. I looked at Meredith, who was watching her family with tears in her eyes. Ready to go make fools of ourselves dancing? God, yes, she said, linking her arm through mine. It's about time I learned some new steps. As we joined the others on the lawn, I realized that sometimes the happy ending isn't about winning or losing, about revenge or forgiveness. Sometimes it's just about finding the courage to plant different roses and see what grows. And in the Fisher Garden, everything was blooming wild and beautiful, just like us.
Chihuahua. The woman shut the door. Avoid repeating that error. It's annoying. I muttered to her as she stood motionless in the unexpectedly silent hallway. She gave me a sneer, appearing relieved that the disturbance had subsided. And with that, she strode right into my room. She moved to the middle of the space, pivoted, and gave me a stern look. It was visible, wasn't it? My thing, she murmured. That slightly aggravated me. It resembled a mishap. I observed nothing. What topic are you discussing? I attempted to counter that I was just lucky to happen to see. What? What were you able to witness? This, she murmured, tugging at her t-shirt collar to expose her chest. There was a peek of her blue panties. Hey, give it up. It is manifesting. I quickly backed away from her, not wanting to make things worse. She was still showing off her chest and accusing me like she was after me. It was in sight, as you and I both observed. I apologize, but I assure you that it wasn't my aim. She slapped my cheek before I could say anything else. She was quite intense the first time I saw her. Hey Scott, how about we go get lunch? It's my treat. The branch manager suggested the following day at lunchtime. I nodded and slapped my smacked face with a cooling pad my boss had given me. He took me to a little cafe that was close to the shore. I had previously walked past it, but never gone inside. The branch manager, who appeared to be erratic, went to the counter and ordered the standard lunch for 2. Yes, 2 lunches. Please choose a place to sit. It was the same woman who had hit me the day before who answered from behind the counter. When she noticed me standing next to the branch manager, her eyes widened even further. I awkwardly held up my hand to meet you. Hi. What are you saying, you peeper? I recoiled from a barrage of insults. Oh, you peeped, the branch manager remarked nonchalantly, before laughing. I was left with nothing to stand on and could only retreat. Eventually, I sat at the counter next to my boss and endured her scowls as we ate lunch. She described what had occurred yesterday when the branch manager inquired as to whether anything had transpired. I listened to their chat in silence, not wanting to add to the already awkward situation. She brought up my shortcomings to the branch manager. I was concerned about his reaction, but he seemed to be amused by the whole event. He is a promiscuous man. He doesn't need to urinate. The remarks made by the branch manager astonished me. She asked excitedly, What do you mean? The branch manager informed her of my transfer's reason and broke out in laughter. With a giggle, she exclaimed, seriously. It astonished me how she responded. I was afraid she would think the worst of me and hate me, but instead she responded, You had some bad luck, huh? With a giggle. The door to the cafe opened while we were chattering eagerly at the counter, and men who were obviously not locals stepped in. Her eyebrows furrowed upon seeing them. Those men were speaking with the management. It didn't appear like they were there for the coffee. After receiving certain documents, the manager promptly mailed them off. The manager tossed the papers in the garbage. Hey, what was that all about? I made the decision to inquire. She answered that they've only recently begun to change. They appear to be real estate brokers who have been actively purchasing homes in this neighborhood. Obviously, they are unrelated to our business. It's true that the company she cited is not well known in the sector. She sighed and added, It looks like they're asking if we're willing to sell this place too. Despite its negative image, land speculation is a legitimate aspect of the real estate industry. If deals are made with mutual consent and at a reasonable price, then nothing is wrong with it. Could you move somewhere else if you could sell for a high price? I recommended. Even around midday, we were the only customers here, so it felt a little empty as a business. I suggested moving and looking for a more lucrative place, but she became very angry and arched her eyebrows. Avoid making rash remarks if you don't recognize the importance of this community, she snapped. If you identify as a local real estate agent, learn more about this community before vanishing into the rear room. She is incredibly enthusiastic about our local community, so I apologize for that. We call her Kathy. Please try not to take it too personally. Continue spending time with us, he said as he stealthily poured us more coffee. I started a new habit after that day. I made the decision to take a leisurely stroll out the neighborhood after work rather than heading straight home. Kathy had sparked something with her remarks about local love. Her remarks gave me motivation, even though I had been depressed since my promotion. Walking gave me the opportunity to learn a lot of new things. Despite the claim that there weren't many young people, I observed that there were a lot of recent youthful arrivals, seemingly drawn to the ocean. The majority of them appeared to have moved here. I had never seen the morning sea, and I'm not a morning person. A young man who had moved from the city and operated a pub invited me to the beach before work. I was unaware of the existence of a nearby beach at the time. There were surfers waiting for the waves just as the sun was going to rise. It startled me to see people surfing so early in the morning because I had never surfed. I walked down to the sandy beach to witness the scene, heart racing. I saw that there were restrictions while I watched them. One person could only ride a wave at a time. They were making way for one another as if there were some sort of hierarchy. It was unexpected. It wasn't as tough as I had thought it would be. "What are you doing?" When I turned to face the voice, I saw that it was Kathy. She held flippers and a huge bodyboard in her hands. "Happy morning." "What is that?" I asked, gesturing to the big bodyboard. Kathy knelt down next to me and placed her flippers in the sand. She then displayed the sizable bodyboard to me. It was attached with some form of rope, unlike a standard bodyboard. What seemed like a wristband was at the end of the rope. "It's a bodyboard." "Have you never seen one before?" she inquired. She was wearing a 3/4 length, short-sleeved sweatsuit. She was most likely going to surf. I discovered that bodyboarding and surfing are two distinct sports. Laying your upper body on the board allows you to ride the waves. Fins, or flippers, are worn on the feet to aid with underwater navigation. With everything being so new, I had a lot of questions. As she performed her warm-up stretches, she methodically went over everything. I discovered that there are certain times when the waves emerge and go, and that the waves are best in the morning. "Scott, why not get it a shot? Living so close to the sea is a waste if you don't." As she put on her fins and got to her feet, she joked, "Make the most of your move." She was set to leave after attaching the leash, which is a chain that holds the board to her wrist, to it. She peered back at me as she walked backward into the water while wearing fins. She had a penguin-like appearance. When our gazes locked, she shot me a huge happy wave. She turned around and began to walk toward the horizon over the waves as soon as the water reached her waist. She seemed skilled at what she was doing. However, I was afraid she may topple over on a strong wave. She picked up some speed and slid her board under the wave. I discovered later that this maneuver is known as a dolphin dive. Before she got to the waiting area where the best waves come in, she passed a couple waves. She waved at me as she sat on her board. She would pick up pace and surf the wave when it came. She slid diagonally down the big waves and looked like she was flying. She was satisfied with her appearance when she came ashore after spending nearly an hour in the sea. It was the other surfers heading back to shore. To my amazement, every one of them said hello as they went past. Even though it was a tiny gesture, it warmed my heart. Under their wetsuits, some of them displayed tattoos. Everyone seemed extremely amiable, in spite of the differences. It was very almost unexpected. Kathy had removed her wetsuit's upper portion. I was a little startled by her bright blue bikini, but then I realized something and had to say it aloud. "Oh, you weren't not wearing a swimsuit at the time." It turned out that it wasn't underwear. She was wearing her bikini, not the underwear I thought I saw her in. Why she didn't mind that I saw it makes sense. Kathy laughed and snorted. Though I was surprisingly revived, I also felt a little adrift. Looking at the sparkling water, I squinted and murmured, "This is a nice town." She smiled warmly and held out her hand to greet me. "Welcome." I shook her hand. It was still a little chilly from the water. I began getting up early to go to the beach after that day. Unfortunately, I am not a swimmer, therefore I was unable to attempt surfing. Even though I knew I would float if I wore a wetsuit, I still found the thought of diving into the water unsettling. I also started having lunch every day at the cafe where Kathy works. I started to know the businesses in the area and started spending more time with the young people who had recently relocated here. I started to hear more and more stories about the land sharks as I settled there. They appeared to be actively promoting their cause. Something large seemed to be moving, and it didn't feel quite right. Then one day my suspicions were confirmed. I watched a black, high-end automobile drive by on my way to work. Through the window, I glimpsed a face I recognized. Bob, the person who had framed me, was there. I was unaware that Bob was leaving his position. He's up to no good with another real estate company, taking a different approach. If he's moving covertly, there must be some dubious activity involved. As soon as I arrived at work, I called a friend who worked at the main office. My acquaintance says that Bob is presumably off for the annual holiday today. His lifestyle has become substantially more lavish, and he has been missing a lot of work lately. I inquired about his sales results. Bob appears to be leading in sales at the moment while I'm away, but my buddies feel that there's a problem with his sales. He thinks Bob might be dealing with risky grooves. Perhaps that's where his ostentatious lifestyle originated. I went to the regular cafe during lunch, hoping to see Kathy. I gasped as soon as I walked into the cafe. The wife of the department manager, the source of my mental agony, was sitting nicely at the coffee counter, sipping her coffee. She smiled softly at me, seeing that I was halted at the door. She motioned to me to take a seat beside her with a quiet flick of her well-groomed finger. I grudgingly took a seat beside her. "What brings you here? You were to blame for that." Speaking it out loud released a wave of long-forgotten rage. Just as I was going to speak something, she put a finger to my lips and said, "Be quiet." I apologized for the time I missed due to the exchange terms. It wasn't my intention to harm your career. My growing rage was calmed by her pitying smile. I find it troubling that I can't seem to despise this woman for some reason. Without being able to respond, I glanced down and she began to tell me the whole truth. It appears that Bob got in touch with her when she was in dire need of divorce. To frame me, he offered her money. She consented because she would need the money in her post-divorce existence. Bob had been severely disparaging me, claiming that I would be a burden on his future endeavors. Why are you telling me all this now? Because there has been no movement of funds. Thus, the agreement is null and void, correct? It was logical. She seemed to be looking into Bob out of malice, too. In front of me, she unfolded his investigative report. I skimmed the report quickly. Bob seemed to be associated with some really sketchy characters. He appeared to be helping them acquire properties for real estate. I came to understand that the person looking through all of the local real estate was going to start a real estate brokerage. I couldn't help but be impressed by the plan's scope. But as much as I liked Bob's ideas, I couldn't accept that these hazardous parties would control this area. "How much would you pay for this?" She cocked her head to look directly into my face. A small amount of glitter glistened on her beautiful eyelashes. I didn't know how much to provide. "How much do you think?" With timidity, I inquired. "How about you treat me to a cup of coffee?" She smiled in response. She said as much, holding up her empty coffee cup in front of my shocked eyes. I spent the evening by myself in the office, going over the Bob investigation report that she had given me. I spent the night writing and emailing the headquarters with my report. By tomorrow morning, the headquarters would undoubtedly be in disarray. Relationships with risky individuals would be extremely detrimental to the company's image. I got a call from headquarters as anticipated. I was requested to attend to the headquarters the following day. After a long time, I found myself staring up at the headquarters building. I was expecting to feel more sentimental, but I didn't. I could only think that this place seemed to have a smaller sky. Someone hurried over to me as soon as I entered the premises with my employee ID. My transfer was arranged by the department manager. "What are you doing here?" the department boss asked, grabbing me by the collar. Even though I've been moved to a branch office, I work for this corporation. I'm at headquarters for business. The manager and I exchanged a brief scowl in the lobby. We were interrupted by the president's secretary. I shrugged off the department manager and was told to report straight to the president's office. It was instructed that the department manager follow along as well. I went inside the president's office and there was Bob, looking pale. The department manager was confused and uncomfortable. I was told by the president, "I read your report." My report was on the desk, along with a ton of other papers and pictures. "They have to look into this yesterday." These were probably evidence of Bob's wrongdoing. When the manager saw the pictures of Bob doing business meetings with dubious people, she became pale. The misbehavior of a subordinate cast doubt on the supervision of his superior. I was hoping that as a result of our shared responsibility, we would both be expelled. Bob was dismissed and the department manager was demoted, according to the president's decision. Later on, I found out that most of Bob's sales were agreements with dubious partners. Our internal policies should allow us to cancel the purchase contracts, but it will be challenging to negotiate each one separately. All I can hope is that everyone at the headquarters will band together and put in a lot of effort. Bob paled as he exited the room after receiving his notice of termination. I heard the president say, "Come back to headquarters." He urged me to be the best salesman I was ever. That's what I had first thought would happen, but I was uncomfortable with it. I said nothing, unable to respond right away. The president appeared to be anticipating my response. The enormous window behind the president caught my attention. The day was bright and the light was streaming in. Still, it was long beyond work hours and the sun had set when I got back to the branch office. Although I assumed that by now everyone would have gone home, the office windows were well lit. People were working unusually long hours, which astonished me. Unexpectedly, a party popper went off as I opened the door. I shouted back, shocked by the popping sound and finding myself coated in thin strips of paper. I had no idea what to say. Greetings from HQ on your return. Getting back on the fast track. My fellow branch employees, the branch manager, the president of the shopping district, and a few surfers I know were all crammed into the office. Everyone showed up when I stated you would most likely be heading back to headquarters. Donning a party hat, the branch manager exclaimed, "You're really loved." Huh. His remarks had already irritated a few people. It's taken for granted that I'm leaving this branch. I've heard you were a top salesperson once. I was completely ignorant. A twinge of sadness shot through my chest as Kathy smiled. You're not someone who should be wasting away in a place like this. You know, I turned down the offer to return to headquarters, I replied. My words put a look of confusion on everyone's faces. Observing their facial expressions, I experienced some remorse. I thought I had let them down. What? Why? Regarding your advancement, how are things going? Kathy barraged me with questions, acting as though she spoke for the entire group. I basically reiterated what I had told the president after giving it some thought. The city is overly small. I can't breathe, and there's no sea. I'd like to pick up swimming. Kathy gave me a look of incredulity and embraced me. I muttered something that was only audible to Kathy, and you wouldn't be there. Kathy did not comment, but by her tight grip on my arm, I could tell what she was thinking. I believe that my choice was perfectly appropriate. As usual, I sat on the sandy beach early the next morning and gazed out to sea. Kathy was getting ready to jump into the waves next to me. Her eyes squinted as she examined the waves. Kathy looked at me, watching her profile. Weren't you the one who wanted to learn to swim? She didn't appear happy that I wasn't accompanying her inside. I wanted to learn to swim, but I didn't even have a swimsuit. Kathy laughed when I told her I had to get the gear first. Just swim in your shorts. I've been thinking, do you want to get married? At my words, Kathy froze. She has always been full of surprises, even since we first met. However, I was successful in my goal to surprise her this time. Gazing at Kathy, who was frozen, I grinned to myself. Regaining consciousness, she laughed, glanced at my smile, and clicked her tongue. I'm not marrying a non-swimmer. She averted her gaze and exclaimed. Then, in a much smaller voice, she added, If you learn to swim, I'll consider it. It was nothing new that she was teasing. When did you start liking me? A bodyboard hit me before I could finish my line. Cease presuming things about yourself. Return to headquarters. Kathy rushed toward the water when she saw me with that parting shot. She approached the edge of the lake and suddenly turned around. She must have discovered that her flippers were missing. She grabbed them from me when I held them out. She turned and gave me a huge wave as she put on the flippers at the edge of the sea. The ring better be a diamond, not a birthstone. I could even go into the sea with her fearlessly. I wish I could have told it depressed me when I was relocated from headquarters to this village and arrived. You're going to find the greatest treasure in this town. I suppose I should thank the goddess of fate for now.
Have you ever come across people who live like parasites? My name is Violet, and I have met 3 such people. My in-laws are your classic definition of leeches. They never worked hard and always wanted more than they could afford. My husband Nate was the only successful member and quickly became the cash cow for my in-laws. When I was dating Nate, I had no idea how bad things were. He did warn me, but I refused to believe him. After getting married, I saw just how bad his parents, Ben and Donna, were. He also had a brother, Shane, who is the golden child and never worked a day in his life. He's not a teenager, though. He's a grown adult in his 20s. Because of my in-laws, Nate and I had to sacrifice a lot. Nate has a good job while I was a stay-at-home wife. It was our joint decision since Nate worked a stressful job and needed someone to take care of him. We were okay with this arrangement. However, money was always tight because his family took away half of his salary. He paid their rent and utilities along with ours. They were never happy with it. They said, "Nate, you need to put in more money towards us. It's not fair you spend so much on your wife. She can get a job if she wants money. We are a 3-person family. We deserve more money. What you are giving is not enough. Do you want to see us in poor condition?" He just wants to keep his useless housewife happy. I don't know why he pays for her. All she does is lounge around the house and look at her phone. I always told you not to spend on the wedding so much, yet you gave in to everything Violet said. Now you have no money for us. That's not what a good son would do. The emotional blackmail never stopped. Surprisingly, the in-laws never made Shane work. He stayed with them, and Nate was stuck paying for his expenses as well. I never complained because I knew family is important. However, I had no idea that I would somehow become a victim of my in-laws. It all started when Donna and Ben got sick, one after another. The hospital bills racked up, and the entire situation was pretty stressful for us all. One day, Nate returned home from the office looking very upset. I could tell something was bothering him. I started to feel concerned about him and told him to talk to me. Nate said, "Violet, my parents are very sick. They're having a hard time managing on their own. I really don't know what to do. You know Shane will be of no help." "Oh my God, how bad is it?" "I know they have been to the hospital, but I thought they were doing okay. They are much better now, but they still need some help around the house. Besides, their medical bills are still pending. I don't know how I will clear those bills and pay the rent for 2 houses at the same time." "I'm so sorry, Nate. I can see it stressing you out. Please tell me if I can help in any way. I'm willing to help for your sake." "I'm glad you asked, Violet. I was wondering if you would be willing to go live with them. It'll be for a short while. Our lease will end next month anyway. If we live with my parents, I can save rent on 1 house. That way, they'll get some help, and I'll be able to clear their medical bills too. There's a lot to think about, Nate, but if that's what makes you happy, we can go live with them. I think I should warn you, if they treat me unfairly, I will leave. I will make sure they won't do that. You're already sacrificing a lot for them. This time, if they mess up, I won't take it lightly. Consider this the last favor you do for me." We set some ground rules, and then Nate proceeded to inform his parents about the arrangement. From what I could make out, they were pretty happy with everything. Somehow, instead of reassuring me, it kind of set off alarm bells in my head. I was praying to God that I don't end up regretting my decision. I would later realize that my worst fears would come to light. With everything set, Nate and I packed up and moved in with my in-laws. They had a spare guest room that we used as our bedroom. Shane made some noise about needing the room for his personal reasons, but Nate shut that down real quick. His parents were surprisingly warm and welcoming towards us. I suspect it was because they knew they had to be in Nate's good books. However, things were about to take a drastic turn. As soon as Nate would leave for the office, my in-laws would pounce on me with a long list of chores. I moved in with them because I thought I would be helping them out. Instead, I was somehow stuck doing absolutely everything on my own. I did their laundry, cleaning, cooking, dishes. mowing the lawn, fixing things, driving them to places, etc. Ben and Donna just had problems with diabetes and recovered pretty fast. However, they acted like they were paralyzed. I was okay with doing the work for Donna and Ben. They were getting old, and I didn't have the heart to make sick people work. However, everyone expected me to do Shane's work as well. Shane did nothing all day. He got up late, demanded I make his favorite breakfast, stayed in his room, littered all over, and only came down for meals. Even during meals, he sat at the table and complained. He never did it around dinner because he knew Nate would crack down on him. When Nate wasn't around, Shane always said, "Why'd you cook this crap every day? You know I don't eat this. Who the hell likes veggies anyway?" It's a balanced meal, Shane. There is meat in it as well. You can ignore the veggies if you want. I don't like this dish at all. Go make me something else. I feel like having lasagna today. Oh, for dinner, make me a steak. Do you really expect me to stop making you lasagna right now? It will take hours. I just finished cooking 2 meals today and still have to prepare for dinner. Why don't you make yourself something? How dare you talk to me like that? I don't cook. I'm a man. Women should do the cooking. My brother is looking after you for a reason. It's your job to feed and work for his family. No, I'm only responsible for taking care of Nate. All this is extra. Besides, Ben and Donna are sick. You are just as fit as a fiddle, so you need to help out more. Hearing this, Shane called out to his parents in classic man-child fashion. It was so funny that I would have laughed, except I was mentally and physically exhausted and had no time to go laughing at a loser. Ben and Donna came down running. They sure appeared to be fine when defending their son. They heard the tale from Shane and said, "Violet, how dare you tell my son to help? This is your job as a housewife. Nate didn't marry to be a parasite in this family. Yes, you have some nerve to stay in my house and tell my son to do your job. He's a man who doesn't have to do feminine work. That's what you are here for. I am not your servant. I am already doing a lot for you guys. The least he can do is make his own meals if he doesn't like mine. Shane literally does nothing but sit around. What he does is none of your business. Now go make him a lasagna. If that's what my baby wants, he will get it. There is no room for arguments. I don't want it anymore. I changed my mind. Violet can give me some money for takeout. That will make up for insulting me today." I was pissed, but knew that arguing with them would be pointless. So I took the money out of my pocket and gave it to Shane. It was a bad day for me. I wanted to cry. However, I didn't do that. Instead, I told myself that my time would come. No one knew that I was already collecting evidence of their misbehavior. I had some recordings on my phone and proof that Shane regularly asked me for money. I wanted to first try and salvage the situation. To be honest, I didn't want to stress Nate any more than he already was. He worked hard to take care of us all, and I wanted to give him something in return. Somehow, I managed to live with them for 6 months. Their behavior never changed. Instead, their demands escalated day by day. Shane still wasn't working or contributing in any way, and I was constantly berating him for being unemployed. Shane never talked back to him. However, when Nate was gone, he took that anger out on me. He made me clean his room, cook meals, and even do his laundry. If I refused, he would complain to Ben and Donna. Then the 3 of them would corner me and verbally abuse me until I gave in. Slowly, I was starting to hit rock bottom. The worst thing happened just when the 6th month came to an end. It was a horrible July with bad thunderstorms. Nate had to be away on a business trip that weekend. Our area was on high alert for tornadoes. Everyone was worried, and even Nate had a hard time being away from us. Just when I was finishing up lunch, Shane came down from his room and said, "Ew, you made that food again? Why can't you just follow my damn instructions?" Donna and Ben are both diabetic, Shane. We can't have rich and oily food every day for health reasons. How many times do I have to tell you to make my meal separately? You are such a lazy witch. I wonder what Nate ever saw in you. Since you don't want to cook, you could go get me McDonald's. Are you insane? There is a tornado alert out there. Do you really want me to go out in this weather? Don't be dramatic. It's not that serious. Besides, this is your job. You need to go get me something or make me a new meal from scratch. Oh, my room is also very dirty. You've been slacking off. You better go clean today. Absolutely not. I'm not doing your work anymore. I already have a lot on my plate with stocking groceries and preparing for the storms. From now on, if you don't like anything, you can go cook your own food. You are a grown man, so clean your damn room on your own. What did you just say? Just wait till Mom and Dad hear about this. You will pay for talking to me like this. Shane, as usual, called Ben and Donna. At that moment, I knew things were about to hit the fan, so I got my phone out and started to record. Ben and Donna came down, and Shane cried to them about how bad I was treating him. They said, "You have no shame, Violet. We have told you multiple times that our son went to a woman's job. You never listen to us. You're an ungrateful witch who's wasting Nate's money. I always knew this little witch is a leech. See, I was right. How dare you mistreat my son in my own house? We've been hosting you, and you have no gratitude. I'm tired of working like a dog for you guys. All you three do is sit and complain. There is just so much a person can take. Besides, I'm working enough for this household. You are the ones who are living like parasites. How dare you insult us and call us parasites? It's Nate's duty to look after his parents, and you, as the daughter-in-law, are responsible for taking care of us. Telling her won't work anymore. She's gone too far. We need to teach her a lesson, Ben. Since it is our house, you are no longer welcome here, Violet. If you can't respect us and do your job, you need to get out. Yes, Mom, Dad, kick her out. That will teach her a lesson not to disrespect us in our house." With that, Donna grabbed me by my arm and took me towards the door. Before I could react, she pushed me out the door and locked it behind her. I fell on the wet grass and scratched my hands and knees. I immediately got up and went banging on their door. I said, "No, you can't kick me out. What is wrong with you? There's a tornado coming, and the thunderstorm is already here. You can't keep me outside." "Stop shouting, Violet. It'll be of no use. This will be the perfect lesson for you. Now you will know what it feels like not to have a roof over your head. This is inhumane. You need to let me in. I can't stay out in the storms. It's not safe. I'm already drenched to the bone. Cry as much as you want. We will protect our son first. A girl like you needs to know her place. Now go away before I call the police." I was still banging on their door and crying. The trio just turned and left to their rooms. In a matter of seconds, I was completely soaked and started to shiver from the cold. The storms were already in full force, and I was scared for my life. Just when I had given up hope, a neighbor lady approached me and told me to come with her. I followed her to the house and was finally relieved. She was an old woman who lived next door. She had heard the entire thing and decided to help me. As soon as I reached the neighbor's house, I broke down in sobs. I knew it was time to finally stand up for myself. The neighbor lady helped me and gave me fresh clothes. She even comforted me while I cried on her sofa. But as the storms died down, rage boiled in me and my resolve grew stronger. I immediately coordinated when the network was better. I said, "Nate, there is something I need to tell you." "What happened, Violet? Is everything okay? Has the storm passed? I can see it in the news." "Yes, the tornado didn't happen, but there was a bad thunderstorm. Don't worry. The weather has calmed down." "Oh, then what's wrong, dear? Tell me immediately. I'm getting anxious." "Your parents kicked me out today. I'm at the neighbor's house. I'm calling you from here." "What? That's impossible. Why the hell would they do that?" "I'm so sorry, Nate. I tried my best to help your family, but they have been verbally abusing me and overworking me. They kicked me out because I refused to remake a meal for Shane or get takeout for him. That is insane. How did they just kick you out like that? Don't believe me? I will send some videos. You can watch them and then make a decision. I hung up and sent the videos to Nate. Additionally, the neighbor lady called him and told him what she had witnessed herself. It was quiet for some time. Nate told me that he would be back soon. My in-laws, on the other hand, didn't even try to contact me. They were peacefully staying at the house and didn't even want to know if I was safe. However, an hour after I talked to Nate, they started to blow up my phone. When I picked up, they called me back into the house. I went there to have a final confrontation. I said, "What do you want now? After kicking me out, you had no regard for my safety. What's the point of calling me back here?" "We made a mistake, Violet. Things happen sometimes. We are family. Don't be mad at us. We will apologize to you." Yes. We can just apologize and move on. Even Shane here will say sorry. Let's just put it past us. "Oh, I'm sorry, Violet. This will never happen again. We were being stupid." Wow, that's some change in your behavior. What brought this on, may I ask? Nate called us today. He was pretty upset at us. He said he will look past it if you forgive us. Yeah, if you don't, then he would stop supporting us. You know we are sick and old. Please don't hold a grudge. Without Nate's support, we will be homeless. Good, because that's what you deserve. People who have no empathy for others should not be shown mercy. I will tell Nathan that I won't live with you three anymore and I don't accept your apology. What Nate does after this is completely his choice. As soon as I said that, the trio started to beg and plead for mercy. They kept repeating that they were sorry and it wouldn't happen again. Shane even dared to say that kicking me out was a small joke that went too far, and that holding grudges is a childish thing. I never paid any attention to them. I gathered some of my things and went to the neighbor's house. I also called and told Nate that I would never forgive my in-laws again. Nate took my decision very seriously. He flew back a day early and went straight to my in-laws. Then he came back and told me that he wasn't going to support them anymore. He was tired of them treating me unfairly, and it was enough. Nate decided to stop sending them rent or paying for their medical bills. He also wouldn't be giving them any allowance. Shane would be completely responsible for Donna and Ben. How he would do that was none of my business. Nate and I then started to look for a new place. We got lucky because one of his colleagues was renting out one of his apartments. We jumped at the offer and started to move our things the next day. Nate also profusely thanked the neighbor lady for protecting me when he couldn't. Suffice to say, we will continue to keep in touch with her. Meanwhile, Ben, Donna, and Shane thought that Nate was bluffing. They did ask for forgiveness, but never actively tried to improve their situation. So, the following month, when Nate didn't send the money, my in-laws were in big trouble. They started to blow up our phones and even called me horrible things. Nate and I simply blocked them on our phones. Any relative who felt sorry for them was sent proof of their misbehavior, and that shut them up real quick. It's been a long time since then. Nate no longer sends them any money. We know that Shane was forced to work in a warehouse and earns very little. The three of them live in a small camper, and things are not looking good for them. Nate and I, on the other hand, have finally put the down payment on our dream home. I am also currently pregnant and expecting our first child. We are looking forward to our new life, away from the leeches that are my in-laws.